Lauren smiled through the video call, her face illuminated by the golden hues of the tropical sunset behind her. The sound of waves crashing gently against the shore blended seamlessly with the distant chatter of women laughing over drinks. She looked radiant, her sun-kissed skin glowing, her eyes shimmering with excitement. "Miss you, babe." "It's just us girls, drinking wine, having fun," she said, twirling a lock of her perfectly styled hair. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Sounds like you're having the time of your life," he replied, leaning back against the couch. He could see the outlines of other women behind her, holding up their glasses, playfully waving at the camera. Everything seemed normal, exactly as it should be, except for one thing. The nagging feeling had been there since she left. He hadn't wanted to acknowledge it, but it lingered at the back of his mind like an itch he couldn't quite scratch. Lauren had been overly enthusiastic about this trip, insisting he shouldn't worry, that it was long overdue. She had sent texts, photos, and little voice messages, making sure to emphasize how much fun she was having with her girlfriends. Ethan never doubted her before. He had no reason to. Their marriage had its ups and downs like any other, but he always trusted her. He was the type of man who gave space, who didn't pry, who believed that love thrived on trust, not control. That belief shattered when he opened the credit card statement, which had arrived with the rest of the mail that afternoon, just another routine envelope among bills and promotional flyers. He hadn't even intended to open it immediately, but something made him pause. Maybe it was the way his fingers trembled slightly as he tore the seal. Maybe it was the memory of her voice. Too cheerful. Then he saw the charges: $250 couple spa experience, $400. Romantic beachside dinner, $1,200. Luxury suite for two. Ethan stared at the list, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His hand, steady and strong, now trembled as he gripped the paper tighter. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was in front of him, searching for any possible explanation that didn't lead to the truth clawing its way to the surface. But there was none. This wasn't a girl's trip. Lauren was lying, and now Ethan knew. Ethan sat frozen, his grip on the credit card statement tightening until the edges crumpled in his hands. His mind reeled, a storm of emotions crashing into him all at once: confusion, disbelief, anger. But beneath it all, a sickening sense of clarity settled in. The proof was right in front of him, and there was no mistaking what it meant. Lauren, his wife, the woman he had trusted with everything, had betrayed him. His first instinct was denial. Maybe there was some kind of mistake. Maybe the charges belonged to someone else. But no, his name was right there at the top. His own credit card used to fund a fantasy that didn't include him. His stomach twisted as he imagined Lauren in that luxury suite, tangled in silk sheets with someone who wasn't her husband. The air in the room felt heavy. He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm, to think. Reacting impulsively wouldn't do him any good. If Lauren had gone to such lengths to cover her tracks, she must have felt confident he wouldn't question her. That confidence had made her careless, and now she was caught. Ethan placed the statement down on the coffee table, smoothing out the creases, his mind sharp and shifting from shock to precision. He wasn't going to confront her over the phone, not yet. If she was capable of lying this effortlessly, she would have an excuse ready. He needed more than just a receipt. He needed undeniable proof. Grabbing his laptop, he logged into their shared bank account and navigated to the recent transactions. The credit card statement had only shown a few glaring expenses, but there had to be more. A history of deception didn't start with one trip. It built over time. Sure enough, a pattern emerged. Hidden among everyday purchases were payments for expensive gifts from high-end retailers, dinners at restaurants Ethan had never been invited to, and hotel stays he hadn't known about. Some were small enough to avoid suspicion, but together they painted a clear picture. Lauren had been living a double life. His pulse pounded in his ears, but he refused to let rage take over. Anger wouldn't win this. He would not be the foolish husband who exploded in a fit of jealousy only to be manipulated by smooth words and crocodile tears. No, he would wait. He would let Lauren walk through the door thinking everything was normal, and then, at the perfect moment, he would let her world shatter, just as she had shattered his. Reaching for his phone, Ethan scrolled through her social media, noting every carefully staged photo from the trip, all smiles, all fabricated. Then he started a folder, one that would soon hold every lie, every transaction, every single piece of evidence he needed. Lauren thought she had gotten away with it. She had no idea the reckoning that was coming. The days leading up to Lauren's return were some of the longest of Ethan's life. He moved through them with a quiet, controlled intensity, suppressing the fury that threatened to rise every time he glanced at the credit card statement. He wasn't going to confront her with just emotions. He was going to bury her in the weight of her own deception. Each night, he sat in the dim glow of his laptop, piecing together the timeline of her affair. He combed through transaction histories, tracking the hidden expenses she had never mentioned. There were reservations at exclusive restaurants, boutique hotel stays in the city, and even jewelry purchases that had never made it into their home. He searched through old messages, remembering moments when Lauren had claimed to be working late or having dinner with friends. With every discovery, his stomach twisted tighter. How long had she been playing him for a fool? It wasn't just about the betrayal, it was the sheer audacity of it. The lengths she had gone to in order to make sure he never suspected anything. The well-timed phone calls, the staged group photos, the casual text updates designed to keep him from questioning a thing. She had woven a flawless illusion, expecting him to accept it without a second thought. And he had, until now. Ethan considered confronting her the moment she walked through the door. He imagined throwing the receipts on the table, watching the color drain from her face as she realized she was caught. But the more he thought about it, the less satisfying it seemed. No, this required something more precise. She had spent months, maybe years, building this lie. He could take a few extra days to dismantle it in a way she would never forget. He began preparing for the moment she returned. He made copies of every incriminating charge, printing them out and stacking them neatly in a folder. He scrolled through her social media, taking screenshots of her perfectly curated posts, each caption dripping with the pretense of innocence. Then, with measured patience, he placed the folder inside his desk drawer, ready for the moment he would present it to her. On the day of her return, Ethan found himself strangely calm. He went about his morning routine as usual, pouring coffee, reading the news, and responding to emails. His heart didn't race, his hands didn't shake. There was something almost serene about knowing the truth and waiting to let it unravel. By mid-afternoon, he received a text from Lauren. "Landed, can't wait to see you." He stared at the message for a long moment before typing his reply. "Me too." She had no idea. A few hours later, the sound of a key turning in the lock echoed through the house. The door swung open, and there she was, tan, glowing, her suitcase rolling in behind her. She dropped her bag by the door and stretched, letting out a contented sigh. "God, I'm exhausted. You wouldn't believe how much fun we had," she said, kicking off her shoes. She walked toward him, arms open, expecting a hug. Ethan didn't move. Lauren hesitated, lowering her arms slightly. "Everything okay?" He nodded, forcing an easy smile. "Of course. You look like you had a great time." She beamed, oblivious. "It was amazing. So good to just get away, you know? No responsibilities, no stress." He gestured to the couch. "Sit with me for a minute. Tell me all about it." She grinned, flopping down beside him, launching into a rehearsed story about spa days, beach outings, and long wine-filled nights with her best friends. Every detail was designed to sound natural, effortless. Ethan let her talk, watching her closely, noting every unconscious movement, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she avoided direct eye contact when mentioning certain details. When she finally stopped, she smiled at him, resting a hand on his leg. "Enough about me. How was your week?" Ethan reached over to the coffee table and picked up the folder. Without a word, he placed it in her lap. Lauren's smile faltered. "What's this?" "Go ahead, open it." She hesitated, but curiosity won over. As she flipped the cover open, her expression changed instantly. The warmth drained from her face, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Page after page, her eyes scanned the undeniable evidence. Receipts, transaction logs, photos of her social media posts alongside timestamped charges for romantic dinners and couples massages. Her fingers trembled as she turned another page. "Ethan!" He held up a hand, silencing her. Lauren swallowed hard, her breathing unsteady. "I can explain." Ethan leaned back, his expression unreadable. "I'm sure you can." She scrambled for words, her mind racing, but for the first time in their marriage, Lauren found herself speechless. Lauren's fingers trembled as she gripped the folder, her eyes darting frantically across the damning pages. She flipped through them, as if hoping for a mistake, a misunderstanding, anything that could give her an escape route, but there was none. Every transaction, every perfectly timed social media post, every carefully curated lie was laid bare before her. Her throat tightened, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Ethan!" "It's not what you think." Ethan didn't move. He sat calmly across from her, his expression unreadable, his fingers intertwined as he rested them on his knee. He had imagined this moment over and over again, the second Lauren realized she was completely trapped. And now, watching her panic unfold, he felt nothing but a quiet, simmering satisfaction. "Not what I think," he repeated, his voice cool, detached. Then tell me, Lauren, what exactly is this? She hesitated, scrambling to gather her thoughts to construct a defense strong enough to pull her from the wreckage of her own making. I can explain, she stammered, forcing a shaky smile. Those charges, they aren't what they look like. Ethan raised an eyebrow. A couple's spa package, a romantic beachside dinner, a luxury suite for two. Enlighten me, Lauren. How exactly do those fit into a girls-only trip? She opened her mouth and closed it again. A wave of desperation flickered across her face as she realized there was no plausible excuse. Her usual tactics, charm, misdirection, carefully chosen half-truths wouldn't save her now. Her eyes softened, filling with tears. "Ethan, please," she whispered. "I love you, I swear. I do." Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not love, Lauren. Love isn't deception. Love isn't lying to my face while you're off with someone else." She reached for his hand, but he pulled away before she could touch him. That small rejection sent another wave of panic through her. Lauren had always believed she could talk her way out of anything, that Ethan's trust in her was unshakable, but now she saw it the way he looked at her. Not with anger, not even with sadness, but with finality. "Who is he?" Ethan asked, his tone almost casual. Lauren's breath hitched. "He waited. She hesitated, her mind racing. "It doesn't matter." Ethan let out a cold chuckle. "Oh, it matters. It matters because you spent months, maybe years, living a double life and expecting me to be too blind to see it." She shook her head. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," he cut in sharply. "I trusted you. I never questioned you. And you counted on that, didn't you? You assumed I'd never look, never doubt, never see the truth." Tears streaked down her face now, but Ethan didn't flinch. He had spent too many nights in the dark, too many days in quiet turmoil, piecing together a reality he never wanted to face. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "A terrible mistake." Ethan exhaled, shaking his head. "No, Lauren, a mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. A mistake is sending a text to the wrong person. What you did, that was a choice. Over and over again." She let out a choked sob, pressing her hands against her face. For the first time, Ethan felt something other than cold detachment. It wasn't sympathy. It wasn't even pity. It was exhaustion. He had spent years loving her, believing in her. He had given her his trust without question, his loyalty without condition, and in return, she had spent their marriage weaving lies, thinking she could have everything, her comfortable, stable home life and her reckless, thrilling affair. But she had underestimated him, and now she was the one who had lost everything. Finally, she lifted her head, her eyes pleading. "Can we fix this?" Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood, his movements slow and deliberate. "No," he said simply. Lauren's breath caught in her throat. "Ethan, please." He shook his head. "Pack your things." The room was deathly silent. Lauren looked at him as if she hadn't heard him correctly. "What?" "You heard me," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Pack your things." Tears welled up again, her hands trembling. "Ethan, don't do this. I made a mistake, but we can move past it. We can." "We?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lauren, there is no we anymore." She choked on a sob, her shoulders shaking. "I'll do anything. I'll cut off all contact with him. I'll make it up to you. Just don't." Ethan turned away, walking toward the front door. "I trusted you," he said one last time, his voice quiet, final. And then, without another word, he walked out, leaving Lauren alone with the wreckage of her lies. Lauren sat frozen on the couch, her mind struggling to catch up with reality. The weight of Ethan's final words hung in the air, suffocating her. She had always believed she was in control, that she could spin any situation in her favor, find the right words, the right excuses, and make everything okay again. But this time was different. This time, she saw something in Ethan's eyes that terrified her. Certainty. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't just angry. He was done. Her hands trembled as she reached for the folder again, flipping through the pages as if a second look would somehow change the truth. But the truth was inescapable now. The evidence was irrefutable, staring back at her in black and white. Each transaction was a reminder of her own arrogance, her own carelessness. She had assumed she was untouchable, that Ethan would never notice, never question, and now she was paying the price. The realization settled deep in her chest, tightening around her ribs like a vice. She had spent years cultivating the perfect marriage on the outside, a devoted husband, a beautiful home, a comfortable life, but it hadn't been enough. Or maybe she had simply been too greedy to see what she truly had. Lauren's eyes darted to the front door, still slightly ajar from when Ethan had walked out. She had expected shouting, accusations, maybe even a heated fight that ended with slammed doors and dramatic ultimatums. But instead, she had been met with something far worse: silence. Ethan hadn't fought for her. He hadn't demanded explanations or given her a chance to manipulate the situation. He had simply seen the truth, accepted it, and left. And now she was alone. A wave of panic surged through her as she scrambled to her feet, running toward the door. "Ethan!" she called out, stepping onto the porch. But he was gone. His car was nowhere in sight. The driveway, eerily empty. She pressed a hand to her chest, her heartbeat hammering wildly. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had envisioned a different outcome, one where Ethan raged, where he gave her the opportunity to beg, to plead, to cry until he caved. But he had given her nothing. No bargaining chips, no foothold to regain control. She turned back into the house, her vision blurring as fresh tears burned at the corners of her eyes. Their home suddenly felt cavernous, cold, like a place she no longer belonged to. The pictures on the walls, the furniture they had picked out together, the small traces of their shared life, all of it was slipping away. Lauren sank to the floor, her breath coming in uneven gasps. She had thought she could have it all. She had thought she could balance two lives, two loves, without consequence. But now, with the weight of her choices crashing down on her, she understood the truth. She hadn't just lost Ethan, she had lost everything.